Tucker Carlson was born on May 16, 1969, in San Francisco, California. His childhood unfolded at the intersection of privilege and instability. His father, Dick Carlson, was a prominent journalist, diplomat, and later the head of the Voice of America. His mother, Lisa McNear, was an artist from a wealthy Southern California family. The marriage collapsed early. When Tucker was 6, his mother left the family without warning, disappearing into a bohemian life in Europe. That wound would follow him for decades, shaping his mistrust of ideological extremism and his fascination with broken authority. Raised by his father and stepmother in La Jolla, Carlson grew up surrounded by political conversation, books, and the expectation of excellence. He attended private schools, most notably St. George's, an elite boarding school in Rhode Island. Friends described him as sharp, quick-witted, rebellious, and allergic to conformity. Even as a teenager, he preferred asking uncomfortable questions rather than giving polite answers. That instinct would become his trademark. After high school, he attended Trinity College in Connecticut, where he studied history. He planned no career in television. His goal was simple: right. He wanted to understand why societies believe what they believe and how narratives shape power. After graduation, he entered journalism the old-fashioned way, pitching articles, scraping by on minimal pay, building credibility through persistence. He wrote for small publications, then larger ones, eventually becoming a staff writer for the Weekly Standard, one of the most influential conservative magazines of its era. Carlson's worldview took shape during these years. He was deeply skeptical of political elites on both sides, suspicious of groupthink, and more interested in contradictions than slogans. He rejected the polished comfort of Washington, D.C.'s establishment circles, even as he worked among them. His style blended humor, historical memory, and sharp cultural criticism. He was not a partisan warrior. He was a provocateur searching for patterns. Television discovered him before he discovered television. In the mid-1990s, he began appearing as a commentator on CNN, known for his bow tie and his dry, cutting delivery. He co-hosted a debate show called Crossfire, where players from left and right clashed nightly. Carlson's reluctance to follow scripts stood out. He argued with his own side when he felt they were lying. He pushed guests to defend their logic, not their party line. In 2004, comedian Jon Stewart famously confronted Carlson on air, accusing shows like Crossfire of harming national discourse. The moment was embarrassing, but Carlson used it as a turning point. He dropped the bow tie. He dropped the format. He reinvented himself. After CNN, he moved to MSNBC, then to Fox News. Each migration pushed him closer to the identity that would eventually define him: a broadcaster who resisted ideological cages. His early years at Fox were modest. He hosted weekend programs, wrote essays, and built a reputation for being unpredictable. But then came 2016, the year that reshaped media worldwide. Donald Trump's rise exposed a cultural gap between America's political class and its population. Viewers wanted someone who could articulate their frustration and distrust. Carlson stepped into that space. In November 2016, he was given a primetime show, Tucker Carlson Tonight. It became one of the most watched programs in cable news history. Carlson's success did not come from shouting or theatrical outrage. Instead, he used a calm, almost surgical tone. He framed politics as a psychological game, elites shaping perception, institutions hiding motives, governments manipulating narratives. He questioned wars, intelligence agencies, corporate media, pharmaceutical companies, and the bipartisan consensus that had dominated Washington for generations. His monologues blended historical references with moral arguments, telling viewers they were not insane for doubting what they were told. His critics saw him as dangerous. His supporters saw him as necessary. Either way, he became impossible to ignore. Religion played a subtle but important role in his worldview. Carlson was raised Episcopalian, a tradition he both respects and critiques. Over time, he became more vocal about faith as a stabilizing force, not in a doctrinal way, but in a civilizational sense. He argued that societies without spiritual grounding fall into confusion and manipulation. He spoke about God less as theology and more as moral orientation. His increasing openness on this topic reflected his broader shift from political commentator to cultural existentialist. Behind the camera, Carlson's personal life remained grounded. He married Susan Andrews, his high school sweetheart, in 1991. They built a quiet, stable home and raised 4 children together. Unlike many media figures, Carlson kept his private life shielded. His public persona was fire and argument. His domestic world was stillness and loyalty. Those who know him say his marriage is the center of his identity, the anchor behind the storm. By the late 2000s, Tucker Carlson Tonight had shattered records. He became the single most influential conservative voice in America, and arguably the most powerful independent media figure since the early days of talk radio. Politicians watched his monologues to understand their voters. Foreign leaders appeared on his show seeking direct access to the American public. He interviewed presidents, whistleblowers, dissidents, and thinkers ignored by mainstream platforms. But influence attracts enemies. In 2023, after a series of internal disputes and political pressures, Fox News abruptly ended his contract. The decision stunned audiences. Carlson disappeared for a short period, then re-emerged not as an employee of a network, but as his own network. He launched Tucker Carlson Network, an independent media platform free from corporate oversight. The move transformed him from host to owner, from commentator to information entrepreneur. This new independence allowed Carlson to expand globally. He began traveling the world, interviewing leaders the Western press avoided. He spoke with figures in South America, Africa, Eastern Europe, and Asia. One of his most controversial moments came when he interviewed Vladimir Putin, a conversation that drew worldwide attention and fierce debate. Critics condemned it as propaganda. Supporters defended it as journalism. Carlson insisted that sunlight is essential, and that refusing to speak to adversaries is the first step toward misunderstanding and war. Throughout these years, his ideology continued to evolve. Carlson became less focused on left versus right, and more focused on deeper themes: economic inequality, the loneliness epidemic, the spiritual collapse of modernity, the influence of intelligence agencies, the psychological warfare of media, and the consequences of globalization. He often said that America's real division is between those who have power and those who do not, and that political labels are just camouflage. His voice grew more philosophical, more introspective, even prophetic at times. He warned that nations fall not from external attack, but from internal decay. He argued that courage begins with speaking truth, even when punished. He insisted that freedom is impossible without strong families, spiritual grounding, and independent thought. Where some saw extremism, others saw awakening. Where some saw danger, others saw clarity. Tucker Carlson became a mirror, reflecting the anxieties and hopes of a generation that felt misled by its institutions. As he moved into full independence, Carlson's career entered a new chapter. No longer constrained by network executives, advertisers, or political operatives, He pursued conversations that challenged the boundaries of acceptable discourse. He interviewed medical dissidents, anti-war activists, philosophers, and renegade scholars. He investigated forgotten towns hollowed out by economic decline. He highlighted stories of ordinary people crushed by bureaucracy and questioned the morality of foreign wars fought in the name of democracy. His religion remained understated but present, a growing belief in divine order beneath human chaos, and a conviction that societies cannot function without transcendent truth. He spoke more openly about prayer, meaning, and the limits of material success. The story of Tucker Carlson is ultimately the story of an American original, a boy abandoned by his mother who grew into a man unafraid of difficult conversations. A writer who became a broadcaster who became a symbol who walked away from the most powerful cable network in the world to speak freely on his own terms. His career reveals something larger about the age we live in, a time when trust in institutions is collapsing, when technology allows independent voices to rival entire corporations, and when the narratives of society can shift overnight through a single interview, a single monologue, a single idea. And this is what makes his biography timeless. Tucker Carlson is not just a media figure. He is a product of a larger awakening, the realization that information is power, that speech is rebellion, and that the search for truth is no longer confined to the official voices of the past. From San Francisco to Washington, from comedy debates to global politics, from a young writer trying to understand the world to a man who now shapes how millions understand it. His life is a reminder that the most influential people are often the ones who refuse to fit the mold, the ones who question what they're told, push back against consensus, and dare to think independently in a culture that fears independent thought. Tucker Carlson continues to evolve, and in that evolution, millions find their own questions echoed back at them. His biography is still being written, by him and by the world he refuses to stop challenging. By the way, don't forget to show some love by hitting the like and subscribe button. Also, write us in the comments what you think about Tucker Carlson. We'd love to hear your thoughts.